Shunned by his family, she found warmth in an old street vendor igniting a twisted tragedy. It was late spring in New Haven, but a chill still clung to the narrow streets, just enough to make you reach for a light jacket before heading out the door. 15th Alley was tucked away in the heart of a worn-down apartment complex, a place where the morning cry of steamed rice buns here had become a familiar part of life's rhythm. But hidden within that raspy call was a tragic, twisted love story, a tale that would soon send shockwaves through the entire neighborhood. Maya, 21, had been married since she was 19. She'd left behind the quiet farm town of her youth to become a daughter-in-law in the bustling city of New Haven. Her husband's family wanted for nothing financially, but warmth was a luxury she could never touch. Her mother-in-law, Mrs. Eleanor Vance, was a New Haven native, meticulous and critical of every single word, and Ethan, Maya's husband, a handsome, dashing young man, was so indifferent he was cold. In their 2 years of marriage, Maya was like a shadow in the old 3-story house, silently cooking and cleaning, fading away in quiet exhaustion. With no child yet, she was already branded as barren. Eleanor dropped cruel hints all day. Her husband remained silent. She had no friends, and her own family was far away. On the days she was home alone, she would often stand on the balcony, gazing down at the street below where an old man with silver hair and a thin frame pushed a small cart past the complex gate each morning. No one knew his name. They only knew he sold steamed rice buns. His eyes were always crinkled as if he were smiling, his head covered by a faded cloth cap. His hands were always clean, and a white scarf was always tied around his neck, like an old habit from a more educated time. Maya never thought she would speak to such a man. But one rainy late summer afternoon, coming home from the market, her foot slipped at the entrance to the alley. The person who caught her wasn't her husband or a neighbor, but the old man himself. He didn't say much, just handed her a handkerchief. "Wipe this off," he said softly. "You've got mud all over your coat." His eyes were deep, warm, and sincere. From that day on, Maya started to notice him. Whenever she heard the call, "Hot steamed buns here," she would sneak to the window to look down. The old man passed through her life like a cool breeze in the suffocating heat of her marriage. She didn't know his name, and he didn't know hers. All she knew was that from the moment they met, her heart began to beat in a way she thought she had long forgotten. After that slip in the rain, Maya no longer saw the old man selling rice buns as a stranger. Every morning, while washing dishes or cleaning the house, she would silently wait for that familiar call to echo from the end of the street. "Hot steamed buns, fresh from the steamer." The voice was raspy but never tired. She sometimes wondered where a man like him, living in the hustle of New Haven, found the strength to persevere for so many years. That day was a Saturday. Ethan had gone to play tennis with friends, and her mother-in-law was out of town for a family reunion, leaving Maya all alone. A light drizzle misted the windowpanes. She stood on the third-floor balcony, the cool wind brushing her cheeks. The cart belonging to Mr. Albright, as she'd now heard the neighbors call him, rolled slowly into the alley. On impulse, Maya ran downstairs. "Sir, can I have 2 rice buns?" Her voice was barely a whisper. He looked up, his eyes crinkling into a smile. "Ah, the young lady who took a tumble. It's easy to slip in this drizzle. Remember to carry an umbrella next time." Maya took the warm package, and as she turned to leave, he called after her. "Try one now, while it's hot. If it's too dry, I'll steam them a bit longer tomorrow." She smiled. It had been a long, long time since anyone had asked her if she enjoyed her food. That afternoon, she brought him a glass of iced tea. It was a simple gesture, but it was the first time she had taken the initiative. They sat together on a stone bench at the mouth of the alley. Not saying much, he told stories about the old city streets, back when cars were few and people could sit and sip green tea, talking for an entire afternoon. Maya sat quietly, listening with her full attention. For the first time in her life, she wasn't being judged, ordered around, or asked, "When are you going to give us a grandchild?" She felt a calm settle over her. From brief encounters that grew longer, Maya gradually realized she no longer hoped for Ethan to take her to dinner. No longer wished for her mother-in-law to stop her incessant nitpicking. All she hoped for was to hear that man's call each day, to see his warm eyes, and to talk with the man who, at over 60, understood her better than anyone else in her life. Though no words of love had been spoken, though they had never even touched, an invisible thread had formed between them, connecting them silently, persistently, and agonizingly. But life rarely leaves anyone in peace. The neighbors started to whisper. A beautiful young daughter-in-law, always at the end of the alley talking to the old man selling rice buns. Suspicious, contemptuous glances began to follow her from behind closed doors and faded window curtains. Maya knew it, but she didn't care. Because for the first time, she felt her heart come alive again, and that was a price worth paying. Those quiet afternoons with iced tea and the sound of Mr. Albright's deep voice became the thing Maya looked forward to most. She told no one. There was no one in that house who wanted to listen to her anyway. Ethan was always preoccupied with work and gatherings with friends after hours. Her mother-in-law was constantly nagging, criticizing everything from the vegetables on the dinner plate to a pair of pants that weren't ironed perfectly flat. So, only those few minutes each day, sitting on the stone bench, listening to Mr. Albright talk about the old days when the people of New Haven lived slower, more meaningful lives, made Maya feel like she truly existed as a person, not as a daughter-in-law, a wife, or a nameless shadow in that house. But nothing can be hidden forever. One late afternoon, as Maya was handing Mr. Albright a bowl of lotus seed pudding she had made, a figure stood hidden behind a utility pole across the street, her eyes sharp and piercing. It was Eleanor. When they got home, she threw her market bag onto the table, her eyes fixed on Maya. "Where were you all afternoon?" Maya froze, stammering. I went to the market and stopped for some iced tea." Buying iced tea means whispering for half an hour with that decrepit old street vendor. Maya fell silent, her heart pounding, not from fear of being scolded, but from the shame of having her actions twisted into something sordid. "Let me tell you something," her mother-in-law hissed. "A married woman needs to know her place. One wrong move and this whole neighborhood will be whispering, looking down on you. No decent person flirts with some street trash. Have you run out of men?" Maya lowered her head, tears welling in her eyes. But she kept her voice steady. "I was just talking with him for a little while. I did nothing wrong." Eleanor slammed her hand on the table. "You did nothing wrong. Do you have any idea that people saw you giving him food? Sitting there, laughing and talking intimately, like lovers in broad daylight. If you bring shame upon this family, don't blame me for what happens." That evening, Ethan came home looking tired. Eleanor immediately recounted the story, her voice thick with rage. After listening, Ethan just frowned and said nothing. He sat at the dinner table, took a few bites of rice, then put down his chopsticks and stood up. "I'll talk to you later, Maya." Maya quietly cleared the table, her hands trembling. She wasn't afraid of being yelled at or thrown out. The only thing that hurt, the thing that cut her to the core, was her husband's silence. He didn't defend her, nor did he ask if it was true. He was just silent, as if the story were fact. That night, Maya couldn't sleep. She lay with her back to Ethan, tears falling silently onto her pillow. Outside, Mr. Albright's call for rice buns echoed, hoarse but steady, as if defying all the rumors in the world. She wondered, if she could no longer hear his voice tomorrow, would she be able to bear it? The next morning, the New Haven sun was gentle, the air seemingly clearer after a night of soft rain. Mr. Albright pushed his familiar cart along the old alley, his steps slow but sure. Today, however, the way people looked at him had changed. The woman who sold vegetables at the corner no longer offered a polite smile. The girl selling lottery tickets, who usually stopped for a cup of tea, avoided his gaze. A few middle-aged men standing in front of the auto repair shop even snickered. Shameless. Still acting like that at his age. "I thought he was a decent old man, not some creep hitting on a married woman." Mr. Albright heard every single word, each one a needle pricking at his chest. He didn't react, not out of fear, but because he knew that rumors were more powerful than the truth. That afternoon, Maya didn't come out. Not a single footstep was heard from the third floor. He sat on their usual stone bench, his hand resting on the wool scarf she had given him. His heart an empty void. He missed her eyes. How they were so often downcast but would light up whenever he told an old story. He missed her gentle nod when she agreed to try a new version of his rice buns. For the first time in years, he felt his soul in turmoil. He had thought that helping a young woman escape her loneliness was no great feat. He simply wanted to listen. To share. Like an old man finding a flicker of light in the presence of youth. But the daily anticipation. The joy he felt at the mere sight of her at the end of the alley, it had all crossed the line of innocent affection. He liked her. No. He loved her. It was a love that wasn't loud. That didn't desire possession. But had been quietly gnawing at him day by day. It was a feeling of both blessing and torment that only those who love in silence can ever truly understand. He didn't go out to sell his buns that evening. He sat quietly in his cramped, rented room. The walls were peeling, the light from the single bulb was a sickly yellow, and the sound of mice scurried from the kitchen. He looked at an old photograph on his table, of his wife who had passed away over 20 years ago. Her gentle eyes seemed to be chiding him. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "But I can't pretend anymore. I've been alone for too long." Just then, there was a knock at the door. It was Maya. She stood outside, holding a bowl of hot noodle soup. Her eyes were red, but she looked calm. "I know I shouldn't be here," she said. "But I need to talk." Mr. Albright opened the door, stood frozen for a second, then stepped aside. She placed the bowl on the table and sat down. Her voice trembling. "Everyone is saying I'm a terrible person. My mother-in-law screamed at me, and my husband is silent. I don't even know what I did wrong." "You did nothing wrong," he said softly, cutting her off. I felt human when I talked to you. That's all. I swear I had no other intentions." Mr. Albright gently squeezed her hand, which was resting on the table, and looked deep into her eyes. "And what if I did?" Maya was stunned. For the first time, he had referred to himself as I, no longer speaking to her as a distant acquaintance. And that look in his eyes, it wasn't the look of a father, but of a man who was truly in love with her. Not another word was spoken. But in that instant, all distance between them vanished. They made no promises, swore no oaths, and no longer feared the prying eyes of the world. Because the most frightening thing of all was to live a life without love. The rumor spread faster than a wildfire. Just one day after Eleanor discovered her daughter-in-law's association with the old street vendor, the entire apartment complex erupted in gossip. Some said Maya was just a naive young girl. Others clicked their tongues in pity for poor Ethan, saddled with a half-wit wife. No one cared about the truth. To them, a young woman daring to laugh and speak intimately with a 60-year-old man was already an unbearable sin. Inside the house, the air was so thick you could feel it pressing down on you. Ethan was no longer silent, but his presence was just a listless shadow. As for Eleanor, she was practically unhinged. She dragged Maya into the living room, slamming her hand on the table. "You have a choice," she seethed. "Either you end this disgusting affair right now, or you get out of this house." Maya lifted her head. Her eyes were still red from lack of sleep, but her voice was unnervingly calm. "I have done nothing wrong. Nothing wrong. You have a husband. You live in his house. And you're carrying on with some 60-year-old geezer. And you say that's not wrong. Do you want to bring disgrace upon my family? Do you want people to spit in my face every time I go to the market?" Ethan sat on the sofa, staring at the floor. Throughout this entire ordeal, from beginning to end, he had not said a single word in his wife's defense. The only thing he offered was his silence. But it was that very silence that cut Maya deeper than any knife. She turned to him. "Do you believe me?" Ethan hesitated, then sighed. "Maya, what you've done is very hard to accept. Even if it was just talking, outsiders won't understand. You have to think of me, too." Maya let out a soft, bitter laugh that twisted her heart. "I have thought of you. Every single day. With every single meal. But not once has anyone in this house ever thought of me. Not even you." The room grew impossibly cold. Eleanor screamed. "How dare you? You dare talk back to your mother-in-law?" Do you have any idea how much face Ethan has lost with his colleagues because of you? Today, you are going to call that old man and end it all. If you don't, I'll report him to the police for seducing an innocent married woman. Maya shot to her feet. For the first time, she didn't shed a tear. Go ahead and report him. But I'm sorry. I cannot live as a shadow for one more day. I choose to leave. Ethan watched her go. A flicker of panic in his eyes. But he didn't stop her. He wasn't used to standing up for anyone. He wasn't used to fighting for anything. Not even for the wife who was now turning her back on him forever. Maya walked out of the familiar iron gate, carrying nothing but a small cloth bag and a trembling heart. She didn't know where she would go or how she would live, but she knew she had just done the bravest thing in her life. She had chosen love over a slow death of pretense. That evening, when Mr. Albright opened the door to his small, rented room, he found Maya standing there, her hair a mess and her eyes swollen. But her gaze was resolute. He didn't ask a single question. He just gently took her hand and pulled her inside. And for the first time, he held her hand tightly, no longer the trembling hand of an old man, but the safe harbor she had been searching for during years of a cold marriage. From that moment on, they were no longer two lonely souls. Mr. Albright's room was tucked behind a row of one-story buildings behind a wholesale market, no bigger than 100 square feet. The tin roof rattled whenever it was about to rain, and the walls were blotchy with old water stains. A creaky bamboo bed was pushed against one wall, next to an old wooden table piled high with old books, and a small radio with worn-out buttons. Yet that night, as Maya sat curled on a small stool, cupping the mug of hot tea Mr. Albright had just made, she felt warmer than she ever had in that 3-story house. There were no shouts. No judgmental stares, only the faint scent of green tea, the slow cadence of Mr. Albright's voice, and a peace she had never known. He didn't ask many questions. He didn't need to know how she'd been scolded or how she'd left. Just seeing her here, in the flesh, sitting in front of him, was enough. They began their life together that day. There was no grand wedding, no paperwork, no license, just two people, one old and one young, sharing a small roof, 2 simple meals, and a few quiet stories each day. Mr. Albright still pushed his cart of steamed rice buns every morning, while Maya stayed home to cook and clean before going to the market to work for a vegetable vendor to help with the rent. Every evening, he would stop by to pick her up. Not a word was needed. A single look and a nod was enough to say, "I'm here waiting for you." At first, the neighbors in the boarding house looked at them with a mixture of expressions: surprise, pity, contempt. Some were blunt. That girl must be in it for the money. Of course. Who in their right mind would love a 60-year-old man? She won't last long. Maya heard it all. But she remained silent. She had learned how to face malicious words back when she lived in that luxurious, cold house. As for Mr. Albright, he would just say gently, "They have the right to think. And we have the right to live." He thought everything had settled. But the longer he was with Maya, the more conflicted Mr. Albright's heart became. He started looking in the mirror each morning, noticing his hair was whiter. His hands trembled more. His eyesight was dimmer. He hid the times his joints ached, never letting her see. At night, he would lie awake, tossing and turning, thinking about things he'd never cared about before. Would he be strong enough to protect her? Would she regret choosing someone like him? One night, while Maya was asleep, he quietly got up and went out onto the small porch. The cold wind bit at the back of his neck. He pulled his old wool sweater tighter, his eyes fixed thoughtfully on the dark sky. Suddenly, a soft voice came from behind him. "What are you thinking about?" Maya was standing there, her hair down, her feet bare, her gaze as gentle as the moon behind her. "I'm afraid," he said slowly. "I'm afraid I'll hold you back." Maya stepped closer, gently placing a hand on his shoulder. "I don't need anything. I just need to be myself. To love and be loved by someone who isn't pretending." He turned and looked at her for a long time. And for the first time, he raised a hand and touched her cheek, trembling and gentle, as if afraid of breaking something sacred. In that moment, though nothing was said, they both knew they were walking a difficult path. But as long as they held hands, They would never have to walk it alone. Late the next afternoon, Mr. Albright pushed his cart to the old downtown market as usual. The chilly wind made his arthritic hands ache even more. But he still wore his familiar smile for his regular customers. Maya was busy helping at the vegetable stall and had told him she'd be home a little late. He had just one rice bun left and was about to head home when a man's voice called out from behind him. Albright. Is that you? Alden Albright. He turned. The man standing there was in his 60s. With salt and pepper hair. Wearing a neatly tucked-in dress shirt and polished leather shoes. Completely out of place in the chaotic market. The man's eyes widened in disbelief. My God. Is it really you? You're Professor Alden Albright. From the Department of Eastern Philosophy at Crestwood University. Aren't you? Mr. Albright froze for a second. Then nodded slightly. Yes. I'm Albright. But I'm not a professor anymore. The man was Mr. Davies, a former colleague who had been in the same department as him for nearly 20 years. Back when Mr. Problem Albright was a passionate lecturer, a respected voice, and beloved by students as the most handsome professor in the faculty. Good heavens! I've been looking for you everywhere. After the accident with Clara and little Samuel, you just vanished. Everyone said you'd moved to France to live with relatives. I never, ever expected to find you here. Looking like this. Mr. Albright gave a faint, weary smile. A man has to live. Where I am doesn't matter anymore. Where do you live? Who's taking care of you? How did it come to this? Just then, Maya walked over from the other end of the market, carrying a bag of vegetables. She was smiling as she said, Honey, we still have some eggs. I'll make you some porridge tonight. She walked right up and casually took his hand. A familiar habit whenever they met at the market. But to Mr. Davies, the sight was like a lightning bolt. He took a half step back, his face changing color. What is she to you? Before Mr. Albright could speak, Maya smiled gently. I am his companion. I'm the one who lives with him and loves him very much. The air grew thick. Mr. Davies stared at Mr. Albright, his eyes clouding over. You were the pride of the department, and now you're living like this. Involved with a young girl who's younger than your own son would be. Don't you feel any shame before your dead wife and child? An invisible knife sliced through the air. Maya went completely still. It was the first time she had ever heard about his wife and child, and the first time she saw a flicker of panic in Mr. Albright's eyes. He placed a hand on Maya's shoulder and squeezed it gently. I don't live for the past anymore. I've tormented myself enough. As for the person by my side now, she is not a replacement. And she is certainly not a temporary fix. She is my new life. Mr. Davies let out a small humph and turned to leave. Do what you want. But don't let people remember your name as a disgrace in your old age. Mr. Albright didn't reply. He only held Maya's hand tighter. That night, in their small room, Maya sat quietly beside him, not asking a single question. After a long silence, Mr. Albright finally spoke, as if telling the story to himself. Years ago, I had a wife and a son. My wife, Clara, was a teacher. We were in a car accident on a trip to the Berkshires. I survived. They didn't. From that day on, I lost interest in everything. Maya squeezed his hand. I never want to replace anyone. But if you'll let me, I want to be by your side. As myself. He nodded. No words were spoken, but a single tear fell silently onto his wrinkled hand. That night, two souls who seemed to have nothing in common, a man whose life had been broken in two, and a young wife who had left everything behind, took another step forward on a journey of love that neither of them had ever expected. One early summer morning, as Maya was arranging baskets of vegetables on the sidewalk for the stall owner, a voice from a distance made her jump. Maya, is that you? She turned to see two figures hurrying toward her from the end of the street. It was her parents, Mr. and Mrs. Peterson. Their faces were tanned by the sun, their bodies thin and worn, their sandals caked with dust. They were panting, and tears began to flow the moment they saw their daughter. Oh my God. Where have you been? You disappeared for months without a word. Her mother cried. throwing her arms around Maya. "Mom, how did you know? The relatives up here have been talking. They said Mr. Peterson's daughter left her husband to go live with some old street vendor." "Oh. Honey. How could you? How can your father and I show our faces to the neighbors now?" Maya went rigid. The moment she thought she had long prepared for had finally come. And it still hurt so much it took her breath away. Her father stood to the side, his eyes bloodshot. "You have shamed us in front of everyone we know. They say you have no decency. Running off with a man older than your own father. Tell me, what kind of life are you living?" "I'm living," Maya said, her voice steady. "I'm living with my own two hands. I work for a wage. And Mr. Albright sells his buns. We don't ask anyone for a penny. But I am loved. For the first time in my life, I get to be myself." Her mother swayed, grabbing her husband's arm to keep from falling. "Oh, God. Aren't you disgusted? Loving a man nearly 50 years older than you. Why would you choose a life like this?" Maya was silent. In the middle of the crowded market, she could feel dozens of eyes on her. Like daggers. Like scissors. But strangely, she no longer felt afraid. She gently pulled her hand away from her mother's grip. "I'm sorry. But if you're asking me to go back to a husband who treated me like a shadow, and a mother-in-law who only saw me as a baby machine, then I would rather die." Her father trembled with rage. He raised his hand as if to strike her. But then he froze. The look in his daughter's eyes was no longer that of the timid country girl from years ago. It was the look of a woman in love. Just then, Mr. Albright pushed his cart over from the other end of the market. He froze when he saw the scene before him. But then, as always, he did not shy away. He walked forward and bowed deeply. "Sir. Ma'am, I know that my relationship with Maya has caused you great pain. I am not a perfect man. But I promise you, for the rest of my life, I will take care of Maya with kindness. I will never let her cry again." Mr. Peterson let out a harsh laugh. "And how will you take care of her? At your age? How much longer do you have to live? Just so my daughter can become a young widow. Have you no shame?" Mr. Albright lifted his head, his eyes welling with tears. "I don't know how long I have to live. But for every day I am still breathing, I will love and protect her in a way I have never been able to before in my entire life." Suddenly, Maya burst into tears. She rushed forward and threw her arms around him from behind. "I don't need to be rich," she sobbed. "I just need someone who won't abandon me." The entire market fell silent, stunned by the scene. Not another word was spoken. Mrs. Peterson covered her face and wept. Mr. Peterson stared at his daughter for a long time, then turned and walked away, leaving a choked silence in his wake. They did not approve, but they could not force her. Because they knew that the look in their daughter's eyes was that of someone who had found her one true love. After that tearful meeting, Maya's parents returned to their hometown without another word. There were no reprimands. But no blessings either. They just left a silence as heavy as a boulder hanging in her heart. But Maya understood that they had seen something in her eyes. And in the steady voice of the man she had chosen. Time passed. And their life continued, not rushed. Not glamorous. But full of a quiet peace. Every morning, Maya would wake early to help Mr. Albright prepare the steamed rice buns. And every evening they would cook together, listen to the radio, and read old books. They lived like an old married couple, deeply familiar with one another. Though in truth, they were just beginning. Maya learned how to make his special dipping sauce from a handwritten recipe, how to wrap the buns in lotus leaves instead of plastic. She quietly preserved his every habit as a way to honor his past and cherish their present. But happiness, as usual, never seemed to last for long. One August morning, Mr. Albright came home from his rounds clutching his chest, his face pale green. "It's probably just a cold," he insisted. "I'm just a little tired." Maya panicked and demanded he go to the hospital. It took a great deal of pleading before he finally agreed. At the clinic, given his history of high blood pressure and chronic pneumonia, the doctor recommended a full checkup. As they waited for the results, Maya stood beside him, her hands clammy and cold. That afternoon, the doctor called her into his office alone. His voice was soft but firm. The old man's lungs are showing signs of severe fibrosis, along with mild heart failure. For a younger person, there would be options. But at his age and in his condition, you should prepare yourself. She nodded, her eyes unblinking. But her heart felt as if it had just cracked in two. When they got back to the room, Mr. Albright was sleeping soundly, his face so peaceful it was as if nothing had happened. Maya sat down and looked at his silver hair, his weathered wrinkles, his calloused fingers, and the tears she'd been holding back began to stream down her face. She wasn't crying for fate or for injustice. She was crying out of fear. For the first time in her life, she felt utterly helpless. She was terrified of living without him. Terrified that she would wake up one morning and no longer hear the call for steamed rice buns in the street. That there would be no one waiting for her at the end of the alley with a gaze as gentle as the afternoon sun. That night, when he awoke and saw her red-rimmed eyes, he gently touched her hand. "You know, don't you?" Maya nodded, no longer trying to hide it. "I'm not afraid of what people say," she whispered. "But I'm so scared of losing you." Mr. Albright smiled, his eyes glowing in the warm yellow light. "Everyone has to lose something in their life. But you must never regret love. If I have 3 months left, I will love you completely for 3 months. If I have 3 years, I will love you until the very last day. And if I do go, you must promise to live for me, too. Can you do that?" Maya threw her arms around him, sobbing like a child. There was no one else in that small room, but their love filled every empty space. From that day on, Maya woke up earlier and went to sleep later. She wrote down his medication schedule, bought him nutritional supplements, and learned to cook the dishes he had loved as a child. She never asked him how much longer he had. She only knew that every day that passed was precious. A day to love each other more completely than the day before. After a follow-up visit, Maya knew his condition would not improve. The doctor said he needed to limit strenuous activity, follow a strict diet, and have someone with him at all times. But Maya understood that what he needed more than any medicine was a place for his heart to be at peace, to breathe with faith instead of the fear that came with every beat. She began to think of something she had never dared to dream of: a wedding. Not a wedding dress, a diamond ring, or glamorous photos. She just needed a promise. One early autumn morning, the sky was a deep, clear blue, the air as gentle as her own soul. Maya woke up early and put on a simple white dress she had bought at a flea market. She tied her hair up neatly and put on a touch of lipstick, her cheeks flushed with nervous excitement. Looking in the mirror, she smiled faintly. It had been a long time since she had felt so beautiful. Mr. Albright had no idea what was happening. He only saw Maya bustling about all morning, cooking, cleaning, and whispering to herself like a bride about to be wed. When she finally emerged, holding a bouquet of wildflowers tied with a piece of straw, he was speechless. "Today is our wedding day," Maya said, her voice trembling. "What did you say?" he asked, his eyes wide, as if waking from a dream. "It can be a wedding with no witnesses," she continued. "It doesn't matter if there's no license. I just need you to stand before me and promise to be my husband. From now until the very last day." Mr. Albright was silent, a lump forming in his throat. In his life, he had stood before hundreds of students to lecture on great literature, on timeless, immortal loves. But he never believed that he himself would be loved so completely. He stepped closer and took the hand of the woman who was trembling with anticipation. "I promise," he said. "We may not be before an altar, with our parents by our side, or with any kind of ceremony. But I promise. I am your husband. I am the one who will hold your hand in health, in sickness, in old age, and even when I am no longer on this earth." Maya burst into tears and nodded. "I also promise to be by your side. No matter what tomorrow brings. No matter what anyone says. I will never let go." They stood in the middle of that shabby room, with its faded cream-colored curtains and its peeling wooden table. Two hearts that had never stopped yearning for love. Maya took 2 cheap silver rings from her pocket, which she had bought at a night market. She gently slid one onto his finger, and he did the same for her. Her fingers were small and slender, fitting perfectly in his calloused hand. Like two final puzzle pieces, finding each other in the vastness of the world. There was no applause. No camera. No witnesses, only the clear autumn sky of New Haven. The distant sound of a car horn, and the familiar smell of rice from a steamer that had not yet been lit. But for them, that moment was eternity. That night, they lay beside each other in silence. There was no passion. No noise. Only their hands clasped tightly and their breaths merging into one. Their wedding needed no one's validation. For it had been witnessed by something greater than any law or prejudice, true love. After their invitation-less wedding, Maya and Mr. Albright lived days that were happy, simple, and strangely profound. Every morning, she helped him set up his cart, and every evening, they would sit together and read old books. Two people from opposite ends of a lifetime, yet they fit together as if they were born for each other. But fate was not yet finished with them. One afternoon, after returning from the market, Maya suddenly swayed and collapsed on the threshold of their room. Mr. Albright rushed to her side in a panic. His trembling hand touched her forehead. It was burning hot. Her breathing was ragged. Her body was drenched in sweat. And her eyes were unfocused. Lost in a delirium. Maya, what's wrong with you? Wake up. He called until his voice was raw. The neighbors heard the commotion and rushed over. Someone helped him call an ambulance. Another ran to buy fever medicine. As he sat in the cramped ambulance, holding her limp body, Mr. Albright didn't say a word. Not a single tear fell from his eyes. But his hand gripped hers, not letting go for even a second. At the hospital, the doctor announced that Maya had a severe viral fever, compounded by exhaustion from overwork. She had to be admitted for observation. Mr. Albright begged to stay and take care of her. But the hospital did not allow elderly visitors to stay overnight. He had no choice but to sit in the hallway, watching the small silhouette of his wife lying still on the white bed through a pane of glass. He didn't sleep that night. He thought about the day she had swept into his life like a breeze. He thought about the look in her eyes when she smiled. He thought about their wedding, which had no congratulations but was warmer than any flowery praise. And he was afraid. He was afraid he hadn't had enough time to love her, that he hadn't been able to give her back the youthful years she deserved. The next morning, he pleaded his way back into the hospital. He washed dishes for the cafeteria, mopped the hallways, anything to be allowed to take care of his wife for just a few hours each day. Whenever he was allowed in, he would massage her hands and feet, whispering old stories into her ear, even when her eyes were still closed. On the third day, Maya woke up. Her hazy eyes slowly focused on a familiar figure. Mr. Albright was asleep in the chair beside her bed, his head slumped over, his hand still holding hers tightly. She looked at him for a long time, and then began to cry. "Why are you sitting here? Who told you to stay up all these nights?" He jerked awake. When he saw her eyes were open, he was so overcome with emotion he couldn't speak. After a moment, he managed a weak smile and lifted her hand to his lips. "It's good that you're awake. I was just so worried I hadn't taken care of you enough." Maya squeezed his hand. "I'm the one who should be worried. I haven't had enough time to live for you. And you've already grown so thin because of me." The hospital room fell quiet, filled only with the soft sobs of two hearts that understood each other completely. The nurses who witnessed that scene would later say they had never seen a couple with such a vast age difference love each other so deeply and so naturally. When Maya was discharged from the hospital, the entire small housing complex came out to welcome her home. There were no more whispers, no more sneers or prying eyes. The devotion in Mr. Albright's eyes needed no explanation. And from the radiant smile on Maya's face upon her return, people realized that love was real, even if it defied all the rules. Life returned to its old rhythm, simple, humble, but filled to the brim with love. Each day in that small room was a day they lived to the fullest, as if it were their last. And that simple authenticity, unexpectedly, caught the eye of a group of young reporters working on a series called Real-Life Stories from the Old City. That day, as Mr. Albright was carefully arranging his steamed rice buns on a tray, a politely dressed young woman approached him. "Good morning, sir. My name is Leah, and I'm a reporter for a community YouTube channel. I heard about your and Maya's love story from a nurse at the hospital. If it's all right, we'd like to film a short segment to share your beautiful story with our audience. Mr. Albright was a bit flustered. Maya stood behind him, a knife still in her hand from chopping onions. Her eyes hesitant. We won't ask any sensitive questions. The reporter assured them. We just want you to sit and tell your story. How you fell in love. As naturally as possible. They looked at each other. Mr. Albright smiled faintly, his eyes crinkled and warm. If our story can help even one person believe that love still exists, he said, then you may proceed. The filming took place right on the porch of their room. There were no props. No professional lighting, just two people sitting side by side, hand in hand, recounting their first meeting. The times they were shunned. The nights they spent caring for one another in the hospital. Maya spoke in a voice as soft as an autumn breeze. Mr. Albright would occasionally interject with a joke, making the entire film crew laugh. But in everyone's eyes, there was a shimmering layer of tears. There was something so real and so beautiful in a way that love is rarely told in a world full of noise and pretense.